The night Harlan Voss decided to humiliate a stranger in front of 200 people, he did it with a smile on his face. That was the part that stayed with everyone afterward. Not the words, not the shove, the smile. It was the kind of smile that comes naturally to men who have never once in their lives been told no. The kind of smile that moves through a room like a cold draft. People feel it before they see it and they adjust themselves accordingly. Shoulders straighten, voices lower. Laughter becomes slightly more careful. Harlan Voss had that effect on rooms. He'd had it for 30 years. The gala was his idea, of course. Everything at the Voss Foundation was his idea. The black-tie dinner at the Fairmont in downtown Ottawa, the guest list of 240 names, senators, tech founders, old glebe money, new Canada money, money that had been in the family so long it had calcified into something resembling character. All of it arranged to celebrate the opening of the Voss Cultural Center, a glass and steel building on the edge of the Rideau Canal that had cost $47 million and would be named permanently and in large bronze letters after Harlan Voss. He had paid for the building. He would also accept the award for paying for it. He would give a speech about generosity. These were the arrangements. The man polishing the service corridor floors on the third floor of the Fairmont that night was named Auberon Cole. Most people called him Benny, the ones who knew him well enough to call him anything at all. Auberon Cole was 61 years old. He had a bad left knee that clicked when he went downstairs. He wore a gray uniform with his first name stitched in blue thread above the breast pocket, and he moved through the hotel the way water moves, finding the path of least resistance, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for him, which was almost everyone. He had worked for the Fairmont for 4 months. Before that, he had spent 2 years doing contract cleaning work across the city. Office towers, community centers, a seniors facility in Vanier, where the residents called him by name and saved him crossword puzzles from the newspaper. Before that, he had spent 31 years doing something entirely different. But nobody at the Fairmont knew that. Why would they? A man in a gray uniform with a mop is a man in a gray uniform with a mop. That is the entire story as far as most people are concerned. Auberon Cole understood this. He had made a kind of peace with it most days. The service corridor on the third floor ran parallel to the ballroom. On nights when the ballroom was in use, sound carried through the wall in strange ways. Conversation became murmur, music became pulse, laughter became something low and shapeless. Benny had learned to tune it out. He focused on the floor, on the motion, on the particular satisfaction of a clean line moving across marble. He was not supposed to be in the ballroom at all that evening. But at 9:43, one of the younger housekeeping staff, a girl named Dimmy, who had been on shift since 4 in the afternoon, and whose eyes had gone a little glassy with exhaustion, knocked on the service corridor door and told him that one of the guests had knocked over a full glass of red wine near the piano on the far end of the room and it needed to be cleaned up before it stained the carpet. The regular porter assigned to ballroom events that night was dealing with a situation in the lobby. Demi had been asked to find someone. She found Benny. He told her he'd take care of it. He gathered what he needed: cloth, spray solution, the small portable kit they used for spills, and he pushed through the service door into the ballroom. It was a beautiful room. Auberon Cole noticed that even then, even with his head down and his hands busy. The chandeliers were original, restored rather than replaced, and they cast a warm amber light that made everyone underneath them look more significant than they probably were. Round tables with white linen. Centerpieces that cost more than most people's car payments. At the front of the room, a small stage with a podium, and to the left of the stage, slightly set back but still visible, a Steinway concert grand. Black polished, catching the chandelier light in long, clean lines. Auberon Cole looked at that piano for a moment longer than he should have. He looked away. He found the spill. He got down on one knee, the bad one, the left one, and began to work. It took him 6 minutes. He was thorough. He didn't rush. He blotted rather than rubbed, worked from the outside of the stain toward the center the way you were supposed to. By the time he was done, the carpet was clean. You would not have known anything had happened. He was gathering his kit, preparing to go back through the service door, when the music stopped. The quartet near the entrance had been playing something soft and ambient, background music, the kind designed to be not quite heard, and it stopped mid-phrase, the way music stops when someone important enters. Harlan Voss had arrived. He came through the main doors with the particular entrance of a man who understands that entrances are a form of communication. He was 64, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, wearing a tuxedo that had been made for him specifically and fitted by someone who treated the work as a moral obligation. He had a woman on his arm, his executive assistant Margot, 10 years younger, perpetually composed, and behind him, half a step back the way satellites orbit planets, were two men from his communications office who had the careful, watchful look of people whose job it was to notice things before Harlan Voss noticed them. The room shifted when he walked in. It shifted the way rooms do when the person who paid for everything arrives. Shoulders straightened. Conversations pivoted. People who had been talking to each other began calculating the distance between themselves and Harlan Voss, and whether it was worth the social cost of closing it. Harlan Voss moved through the room slowly, deliberately, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, managing each interaction with the precision of a man who had done this for decades. He did not acknowledge the waitstaff. He did not acknowledge the musicians. He did not acknowledge the people who had set the tables and polished the silverware and kept the room running the way a clock keeps time. Constant, necessary, invisible. He saw Auberon Cole when he was about 30 feet from the piano. Auberon Cole was standing now, kit in hand, making his way back toward the service door. He was not doing anything remarkable. He was not in anyone's way. He was simply there, a man in a gray uniform, moving with quiet purpose through the edge of a room full of people who were dressed entirely differently from him. Harlan Voss stopped. The two communications men behind him stopped. Margot stopped. Harlan Voss looked at Auberon Cole. Then he looked at the Steinway. Then he looked back at Auberon Cole. There was a fraction of a second in which something unreadable crossed his face. Then the smile came back. Hey. Harlan Voss said it the way people say things they expect to land without resistance. Not loud, but clear. Loud enough. Auberon Cole turned. You're the cleaning guy, right? Harlan Voss said. Yes, sir, Auberon Cole said. Harlan Voss pointed at the piano. Were you touching that? There was a pause. The people nearby had gone quiet. The way people go quiet when they sense that something is about to happen that they will want to be able to describe later. I cleaned a spill nearby, Auberon Cole said. I didn't touch the instrument. Harlan Voss tilted his head slightly. The smile stayed. You sure about that? 'Cause I saw you looking at it. I was looking at it, Auberon Cole said. It's a beautiful piano. Something shifted in Harlan Voss's expression. Not anger exactly, something more considered. The look of a man choosing, deliberately, to make an example of something. That's a $130,000 Steinway, Harlan Voss said. It's not something you look at, pal. It's not a museum piece for the cleaning staff. Several people nearby had turned now. Someone at the closest table had set down their wine glass. I understand, Auberon Cole said. His voice was even. His hands were at his sides, cleaning kit in one hand, cloth folded in the other. But Harlan Voss wasn't finished. He turned to the couple nearest him, a senator and his wife, both watching with the careful neutrality of people who have learned not to take positions in rooms where they haven't yet assessed the social cost of doing so. And he said, with a small laugh that invited them to share it, you let these people wander around unsupervised and they start touching the furniture. These people. The senator's wife looked at her hands. The senator looked at the middle distance. Nobody laughed. Auberon Cole was quiet for one breath. 2. I should get back, he said, and took a step toward the service door. And then Harlan Voss did something that silenced the nearest quarter of the room entirely. He stepped forward, reached out, and pushed Auberon Cole on the shoulder. Not violently, not the kind of push that knocks someone down. The kind that is somehow worse. The kind that says, you are movable, you are an object that can be redirected. The kind of push that strips a person of dimension and says, simply, you are in my way. Auberon Cole did not fall. He caught himself. He turned. For a moment, the two men looked at each other. Harlan Voss's chin was raised. His hand was already back at his side. He had the expression of a man who considered the matter resolved. Auberon Cole's face was doing something more complicated. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something that the people watching would struggle later to name precisely. Something that looked, if you studied it, like patience. The very end of a very long patience, the last inch of it, held by a man who knew something that the room did not yet know. I'd like to sit at the piano, Auberon Cole said. The room went completely still. Harlan Voss blinked. I beg your pardon? I'd like to sit at the piano, Auberon Cole said again. Same tone, same unhurried certainty. For a few minutes, if you'll allow it. Harlan Voss stared at him. Then the laugh came, short, involuntary, the kind that comes from genuine disbelief. He looked around at the people watching, collecting witnesses for the absurdity of what he was hearing. You want to? He stopped. He shook his head. You're the cleaning staff, pal. You don't sit at the piano. You go back to whatever you were doing and let the adults handle the rest of the evening. I used to play professionally, Auberon Cole said. 3 words that landed in the room like 3 separate stones dropped into still water. Harlan Voss looked at him for a long moment. I don't care, Harlan Voss said. And he meant it. That was the thing. He genuinely, completely did not care. He turned his back. He said something to Margot in a low voice. Margot nodded once, not quite meeting his eyes. And Auberon Cole stood there for a moment in the silence of the room, holding his cleaning kit in his gray uniform with his name stitched in blue thread, and made a decision. He walked to the piano. You need to understand how quiet the room was. Not the polite quiet of people paying attention, the absolute quiet of people who had stopped breathing slightly because they understood they were watching something and didn't know yet what it was. Auberon Cole set his cleaning kit down on the floor beside the bench. He sat. He adjusted the bench, not dramatically, not performing the adjustment, just finding the right distance the way pianists do, automatically, from habit, from 31 years of muscle memory. He placed his hands on the keys. He didn't play immediately. He sat for 1 second, maybe 2, with his hands resting there, fingers curved, palms slightly open. The posture of a man returning to something. Harlan Voss turned around. Get away from that piano right now, he said. Auberon Cole played a chord, 1 chord. An opening chord, rich and full, the kind that fills a room the way the first light of morning fills a room. Gradually, completely, in every corner at once. And then he began. What came next is the part people would describe differently, because music does that. It arrives differently in different people. Some would say he started with something classical. Some would say it was almost hymn-like. One person near the back of the room would tell her daughter about it weeks later and say that the first thing she thought was, whoever is playing that has been doing it their whole life. You could feel the decades in it. He played Chopin first. The Nocturne in E-flat major, Op. 9, number 2. Except he didn't play it faithfully. He played it the way someone plays something they've made their own over a lifetime. Slower in certain places, more weight in others. A gentleness in the right hand that turned each phrase into a kind of question. Somewhere around the 2nd minute, the string quartet near the entrance stopped their quiet ambient playing. They didn't put down their instruments, they just stopped. A waiter paused near a table he'd been clearing. The senator's wife's hand moved to her collarbone. Harlan Voss had not moved. His communications men had not moved. Margot was looking at her hands. Then something happened in the music. A pivot, a modulation, a shift in key that moved the whole room from one emotional place to another. From European classical to something more grounded, more North American, more rooted in a different kind of history. Auberon Cole's left hand changed what it was doing, and suddenly the room recognized something: jazz. Not imitation jazz. Jazz that had grown up alongside the classical, that knew it from the inside, that had spent years in conversation with it. A woman near the stage whispered something to her husband. He nodded, not taking his eyes off the piano. The music built. Not loudly. Auberon Cole didn't play loudly. He played precisely. There's a difference. Loud music fills space. Precise music empties it, clears it, makes room for something. The room was very, very empty. Harlan Voss, at some point, sat down at the nearest empty chair. He sat the way people sit when their knees have made a decision that their pride hasn't caught up with yet. Auberon Cole played for 11 minutes. When he finished, not with a dramatic finale, just with the natural end of the thing he had been playing, a quiet resolution, a chord that dissolved rather than landed. There was a silence that lasted 4 full seconds. Then the applause began. Not the applied applause of a room going through the social motion of appreciation. The real kind, the unplanned kind, the kind that starts somewhere in the middle of a room and moves outward because people can't not. The senator started it. His wife was already there before him. Someone near the back stood. Then 2 more people. Auberon Cole sat at the piano with his hands in his lap and did not look up immediately. He looked at the keys for a moment first, as if thanking them for something. Then he lifted his eyes. The room was standing. Not all of it, but most of it. Most of 240 people in a ballroom in the Fairmont in Ottawa were on their feet, and the applause was the kind you read about but aren't quite prepared for when you hear it. A man near the stage, Theodore Olawale, a retired music professor from the University of Ottawa, 72 years old, who had been brought to the gala by his daughter and who had spent most of the evening wondering why he'd agreed to come, stepped forward from the crowd. Theodore Olawale said, in a voice that carried without effort as the applause began to fade, "Does anyone in this room know who this man is?" The room quieted again. Theodore Olawale looked at Auberon Cole with an expression that the people nearby would later describe as recognition. The specific recognition of one musician encountering another. "This," said Theodore Olawale, "is Auberon Cole." The name meant nothing to most of the room. Rooms like this tend not to know the names they should know. He was the principal pianist of the National Arts Center Orchestra, Theodore Olawale said. For 14 years, he performed at Carnegie Hall 3 times. He was the first black Canadian pianist to perform at the Edinburgh International Festival. His recording of the Ravel Concerto was included in the CBC's list of the 100 essential Canadian recordings. Theodore Olawale paused. He taught 22 students who now perform professionally. 2 of them are in this room tonight. He named them. Both of them were at different tables, at different ends of the room, and both of them stood up. Both of them started moving toward the piano. The room was very, very quiet by then. Harlan Voss was still sitting in the chair at the nearest table. He had the look of a man trying to shout something, and finding that the numbers kept coming out wrong. One of Auberon Cole's former students, a young woman named Celestine Parks, 31, who performed with the Toronto Symphony and who had been at the gala as a guest of the Cultural Center's music program, reached the piano and crouched down beside the bench. She didn't say anything at first. Auberon Cole looked at her. "Professor Cole," she said. It was the first time anyone had called him that in 4 years. He put his hand over hers, briefly, and something moved across his face that the people near enough to see it would not describe as happiness exactly, more like arrival. The particular feeling of arriving somewhere you had thought was gone. Celestine Parks turned to the room. She had the posture of someone who had performed on stages across the country and was not frightened of the space in front of her. "Professor Cole had a stroke 4 years ago," she said. "He lost the use of his right hand for 18 months. He lost his position. He lost his apartment. He lost his savings to medical bills." She paused. "He spent 2 years teaching himself to play again, by himself, with no support from the institutions that had benefited from his name for 14 years. Another pause. "He has been working nights to pay his rent." The room absorbed this. Harlan Voss did not move. "He called me 2 months ago," Celestine Parks said. "He wanted to tell me he could play again. He played me something over the phone." She stopped, and for a moment her composure flickered. "I cried for an hour." The senator's wife was not attempting to compose herself at all. 3 more people in the room had sat down, not because they were tired, but because their knees had done the same thing Harlan Voss's had done, 20 minutes earlier. Theodore Olawale walked to the podium. He was not scheduled to speak. There was a program for the evening, speeches, awards, a video presentation about the Voss Cultural Center, and Theodore Olawale was not in it. He stepped to the podium anyway. "I've sat on the Arts Funding Committee for this province for 19 years, he said. "And I would like to say, for the record, that the arts community in this country failed Auberon Cole." He looked out at the room. "Not in theory, in practice, in specific documented, findable ways. We didn't come. We didn't call. We let a man who gave 31 years to Canadian music wash floors. He let the sentence sit. That's not someone else's failure. That's ours." The applause that followed was slower, heavier, with the quality of an admission rather than a celebration. Harlan Voss stood up from his chair. He was a man who had managed rooms his entire life. He had managed press, managed boards, managed narratives, managed the specific social calculus of public reputation with the precision of an actuary. He understood with the animal instinct of someone who had survived 40 years in business that the room had shifted entirely beyond his management. He left before the speeches were done. He left quietly. His communications men went with him. It was noticed. The arts section of the Ottawa Citizen ran a story the following Tuesday. A freelancer who had been at the gala, a culture writer named Diane Courtemanche, had recognized Auberon Cole and taken notes. The story was 1,200 words. It was headlined simply, "The Pianist the Room Forgot." It was shared 22,000 times in the first 48 hours. It was picked up by the Globe and Mail. It was picked up after that by outlets that didn't usually cover Canadian arts at all. The National Arts Centre called Auberon Cole's phone on Wednesday morning. Someone from the music program director's office. He let it ring. He was in the middle of something. He was at the piano in his apartment in Lowertown. A small apartment, a rented upright, thin walls, neighbors who had stopped complaining about the playing 8 months ago when they realized they'd started to expect it. And he was working on something he'd been working on for 3 years. A composition, his own. Something that was neither classical nor jazz, but that moved between them the way he moved, with ease, without apology. He let the phone ring. He kept playing. Outside, the morning light was coming through the window the way Ottawa light comes through windows in autumn, flat and gray and full of something. The Rideau River was down there somewhere, past the rooftops, past the rust-colored maples dropping their leaves into the current. Auberon Cole played. He played until the morning opened up around him, until the notes found each other, until the thing he was building revealed its next room, the way houses do when you've lived in them long enough. Quietly, without announcement, simply becoming more of themselves than they were the day before. The phone rang again. This time, he picked it up.